Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Okay, let's do a little thing we call the mailbag at John Middlekauff. Instagram, fire in those DMs. Just my name. DMs wide open. Get your questions answered here on the podcast. From TJ. Enjoy your insight and perspective on football and real-world topics. Like this guy. Just wondering your thoughts on the Raiders offseason so far. Chargers fan that lives in the Central Valley. So naturally surrounded by Raider fans. I understand the Wilkins signing, and I think it was a little steep, but get the need to solidify the defensive line. I don't get Minshew. Baker Mayfield played for $4 million last year and is by far a superior quarterback. I have never been impressed with Telesco and had a front row seat to his poor management of the Chargers. I honestly can't think of a good free agent signing he had. Then you let Jacobs, maybe your best offensive player, leave to the Packers when I feel like some of that Minshew money could have been spent to keep him around. I don't think Minshew is adding any wins to your win column. Are the Raiders destined for the same dysfunction we saw with the Chargers? Well, the Raiders didn't have a quarterback. Like, you could not roll into next season with Aiden O'Connell. I mean, there's a chance he's a fringe backup. We know Minshew is a legit backup. Ideal starter, obviously not. But he got the bridge contract. The reason Baker went for $4 million last year, didn't have many people bidding for his services, right? And then he proved that he still was pretty good, and he got his bigger contract. But Minshew earned himself a lot of money last year playing for Steichen and just keeping the Colts afloat and really right down to the last game, and honestly, that last throw, which he missed, in the playoff hunt, which the Raiders don't have a serviceable quarterback that they can compete to be any good next year, right? And listen, Aiden O'Connell did the best he could. I mean, they won a game against the Chiefs where he didn't complete a pass in the second, third, or fourth quarter. Like, that is not a sustainable way to play. And the Raiders don't control their own destiny for a quarterback in the draft. So worst case, if they just had to play a season with Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, while obviously going against Herbert and Mahomes, I have to look at the rest of their schedule. Not an ideal situation. It's better than rolling in with Aiden O'Connell. And it also allows you, if you are able to draft a quarterback you like, which we're still a month plus away from the draft, to not force that guy into play right away. So I think it gives them a little flexibility. I hear what you're saying. Like, is Josh Jacobs a better player than Gardner Minshew? 100%. But if I have to pick a quarterback who I can start with week 1 or my running back, I don't really have a choice. So I understand it. Do I want to give the guy $15 million? Ideally, no. And would a lot of teams have done it? Probably not, but I do think they're in kind of a unique situation. I think the problem for the Raiders is they have some high-end star players, right? Devontae, elite. Crosby, elite. Wilkins is pretty damn good, and with Crosby, might be considered elite. But if you don't have a good quarterback, like, you're not going to make the playoffs in the AFC. So I think there's a ton of pressure on them to win, to just land a quarterback in the draft who becomes a good player. If they don't, I think they'll be destined to what they've kind of been, just in no man's land. But I understand the signing. I am not against the signing. And ultimately, when it comes to a team like this, when you don't have a starter on the roster and you don't have a super high pick, you kind of got to do this. You kind of got to sign that bridge player. Which is what you want to avoid. I also think this. Telesco made some mistakes, like any GM, but he was a product of like Brandon Staley, Anthony Lynn. They weren't very good coaches. As head coaches. Anthony Lynn's a really good assistant. We'll find out with Brandon Staley. One thing with the Raiders, and I understand why they did it, because a couple years ago, I think they regret not just rolling with Rich Bisaccia, the special teams coordinator, when he helped him, when Gruden got fired and he led him to the playoffs, is they didn't want to make that mistake again, and they went with Antonio Pierce, which I completely understand doing it. Now, do I believe Antonio Pierce is going to be a star coach? I think it's very, very difficult when you don't have a quarterback, even if you do have the talent to be a guy. Now, he's pretty outspoken, a lot of pump in his chest, but like he's a former player and was a damn good player and here's where I support Antonio Pierce. Who likes you? Who supports you? Well, Marvin Lewis and Tom Coughlin, two pretty high-level football guys, are Antonio Pierce guys. So it's why I believed in Dan Campbell. Now, what did Dan Campbell get pretty quickly? He got Jared Goff. So for all the picks that the Lions hit on and the talent they have at all these different positions, if they had a shitty quarterback, if they rolled out with Aiden O'Connell last year, they would not have been that good. So if Antonio Pierce is going to be a good coach, he doesn't need Mahomes. I mean, ideally you get something like that. He just needs a top, guy that's like 14th, right? And if he doesn't get that, it's going to be very, very difficult. It really is. So I think the success of the Raiders, like a lot of teams, all hinges on the quarterback. Like the Commanders. They will be good. They're a well-run operation now. But if they miss on this quarterback pick, they're fucked. The Jets, like they missed on Zach Wilson. It had devastating consequences. The 49ers would have been completely screwed if Purdy didn't end up being good as a 7th-round pick. So it's all going to come down to quarterback play. And Gardner Minshew at least can just keep them afloat. This is a little off topic, but I'm a current senior in college and was recently admitted to graduate school at your alma mater, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Congratulations. Must be a smart guy. I was wondering how you liked your time there and if you would recommend. I loved it, man. It was a pretty special place. And for me personally, it was awesome. I mean, it's just an incredible town in Central Coast of California. It's not on the water, but you're 10 minutes away from the ocean. Pismo Beach, Avila Beach. Without that experience, it allowed me, I got to work with the athletic department and then the football program. So it kind of catapulted early on in my career. I don't even know if the school newspaper is in function anymore, but your boy had a little column called Johnny in the Box. But overall, I mean, incredible place to go to as an undergrad. Babes, booze, incredible weather, fun party scene, but I would recommend it for sure. Now, I don't know exactly what you're going to be a graduate student in. There's not that much industry there. This isn't some big city, but could not have had a better time in college. The thrill and excitement of March Mania is here. And DraftKings Sportsbook, one of America's top-rated sportsbook apps, is giving new customers a shot to turn $5 into $150 instantly in bonus bets with any college basketball bet. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code JOHN, J-O-H-N. New customers can bet $5 to get $150 instantly in bonus bets only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. Was at the USC basketball game and CJ Stroud walked up to LeBron to say goodbye. I was sitting pretty close and he looked really thick. On the slightly shorter side for a quarterback, but extremely built and broad-shouldered. We got a little scout here in the stands. I know hindsight is 20/20, but I don't know how Bryce Young was taken ahead of him. I'm a believer in being open to average physical traits for some attributes, but why take the risk on someone so small? Another question. What is the league sentiment on Will Levis? Yeah, I think Bryce Young was a really good player in college. I loved him. Playing at Alabama, his instincts, he was a good pocket quarterback. But once you see him in the NFL, it's pretty jarring. Now, I'm with you. It's hindsight's always 2020, but I think it was pretty universally believed in scouting departments. This guy was a big time player. Then things change once you get to the NFL. A lot of guys we viewed as great prospects, and they get drafted high, and then they get to the NFL and they're not as good. A lot of guys, someone texted me the other day about Keenan Allen. It's like Keenan Allen went in the third round. Think how many players who have been out of the league for 7, 8, 9 years went above Keenan Allen in the draft. If you would have known that at the time, Keenan Allen's going in like the top 15 of his draft, but you don't. So it's always easy immediately. And here's the thing. It's not like CJ fell. He went number 2. And I don't know this for a fact, but people have alluded to this. I think it's fair to say if the Texans would have had the number 1 overall pick, that they would have taken Bryce Young. So I'm with you. Once you see the guy and then you watch him play, you're like, what are we doing? But it happens all the time. And it's going to happen again every single draft. So it has a chance to be an all-time mistake if CJ becomes what it looks like he has the chance to become, and what Bryce is just going to have to overcome with his organization to begin with. You know, it's hard, quote unquote, league sediment on a player who's young, right? You could talk to people in the league that love the guy or love the guy coming out, and you could talk to people in the league that did not like the guy. I do think it's one thing. I thought once upon a time, like his junior year, he had a chance to be a top pick, like the number 1 guy. Obviously, his senior year did not go well. Colin talked about some teams, were not huge fans of his lifting regiment. We've seen the dad bods on Mahomes. Brady no longer has a dad bod because he doesn't, eat anything with any saturated fat. We were watching the documentary the other night in bed, and I was like, God, Maria, Tom Brady, like in the early, even later 2010s, obviously he's always been a pretty good looking guy, but looked like a normal human. And I don't have any hair, so I'd never blame anyone for getting hair transplants. Tom Brady's hair transplants worked, but it looks like he's got some surgery on his face. But he's never been, some huge lifter. Josh Allen, there was a picture circulating about the dad bod. You don't need to be a big lifter to be a good quarterback. Derek Carr, when you watch him during OTAs, always has his jersey rolled up and his guns. Derek likes the gym. Like, I don't need my quarterback to be in love with the weight room in the sense of curls and squats maybe, but the upper body. It's more about pliability. And that's the one thing when you watch Will Levis physically, good athlete, runs fucking guys over like he's a linebacker, huge arm. Can you be a good quarterback? I would say most people would say, we'll see. Historically, the odds are against you, but the Titans clearly did a good job, or at least were very, very aggressive of like, we're going to find out really quick. We get him Tony Pollard. We get him Calvin Ridley. They're going to be aggressive, putting offensive weapons around them. And I think the reason you do that is, one, just you want good players on your team. They are in desperate need of impact offensive skill guys. But also, like, I'm not a huge, well, he didn't play with anyone. Most guys in the league, you can't really say that about. Eventually, it's like you're playing with somebody. Well, that was the Justin Fields argument. Like, who's he playing with? I don't know. DJ Moore, who'd start on every team in the NFL. Mooney, pretty good little offensive weapon. Cole Kmet, solid tight end. Like, he had enough weapons to prove he was serviceable in the passing game. And now I think we're going to get that with Will Levis this year. At least be able to have somewhat of, I wouldn't say like a bottom line official, he's good or bad, but like you'll be able to tell, is this something worth continuing or something worth pivoting off of? Like the Falcons, it was clear, like, this guy can't play. And now he got traded, and now Desmond Ridder's a backup. Are there any restrictions on a signing bonus? If not, for example, if an owner has enough cash, could they pay a player a $200 million signing bonus and $1 million salary and only take $1 million of cap hit? It seems like there must be some limits, or there really isn't a hard salary cap. Well, a signing bonus just means if I pay a guy $100 million in a signing bonus, I think Matt Ryan got like a huge signing bonus years ago. That still impacts your cap. It still gets what's the word I'm looking for? Spread out. That's not there's an accounting term, amortized over the life of a deal. So just if I give you 2 years, $50 million, and I give you a signing bonus of $40 million. So there's just a difference of just $10 million left. That's not guaranteed. It's just part of the contract. That $40 million, you don't just get to like not put that on the books. It still impacts your cap. So I hear what you're saying, and it's confusing the way the stuff is reported, but it's not just because you could do exactly what you said, but that $200 million, if it's a 5-year contract, still gets, you get to pick and choose where you impact the cap, but it doesn't just not impact you. It's more likely some teams have more cash on hand. It's why deals get done, right? It's why guys sign, because you would always rather have the money today than in a couple years. Inflation, time value money. But it doesn't circumvent your books. Hey, John, I played D3 college ball. Athlete. In Minnesota and still learning something new every time I listen to the pod. All my teammates want the Vikings to draft Penix because of the flash. I want us to draft McCarthy. I think he's athletic, less injured, a proven winner, and wasn't asked to do anything at Michigan. But if he could do what he was asked to do. I think our coach is an elite offensive coach and could make him a top 10 NFL quarterback. I just saw we signed Darnold to a 1-year deal. What do you think about the Vikings should do at long-term quarterback? Also, I know losing Cousins is bad in the short term, but we weren't desperate and now have flexibility and aren't tied to a horrible contract. You know what social media loves to do? Like when a young player unfollows or follows people, it's like, oh my God, he just took so-and-so team out of his bio. Or, oh my God, JJ McCarthy just followed Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. May mean something, may mean nothing. Maybe just, I don't know, wanted to follow those guys. Maybe he meant them training at one of his training facilities. Or maybe he knows the Vikings like him a lot. I would imagine they will be heavily in the mix to draft one of these quarterbacks. But this is what I keep saying. It goes back to the Raiders, the Broncos, the Vikings. They're not alone. And none of these teams control their own debt. You don't know, like, it takes two to tango. Are you going to be able to trade up? Does the team want to trade back? Is the guy that you specifically like there? So it's complicated. When I watched JJ McCarthy, I didn't see some super high pick, but I'm just basing it off his talent on that given game. Part of the draft is about projecting, not just what he is right now. What can he be? How old is he? What are his physical traits? Like you said, what's he asked to do? Maybe it's not fair to just judge him on an individual game basis when he doesn't typically play, right? Just flinging the ball all over the yard, which you would do much more often in the NFL, especially if you had Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson. So maybe a lot of scouts and front offices view there's a lot of untapped potential. You're an inspiration to achieving great things. Just a podcaster, man. Messaging you about tipping. Last season, I went to the Hawks 49ers game at Lumen Field. Assume that's what Seattle now calls their field. They have a new self-checkout beer lines. That would be awesome if you're like 19 years old. Now get this. There's a tip option when you ring yourself up. I kid you not. I watch a sheep in front of me mindless added 18% to their insanely overpriced beers. Not us though, John. We're not cheap. That's insane. I notice this sometimes at the gym I go to. The gym I go to kind of is an all-in-one. There's like a spa there. There's like stores and there's a cafeteria. And this is always risky. It's like anyone that's a member at a country club knows. You just walk up and go, hey, Middlekauff, 4 beers for my buddies. Or can I get 4 hot dogs, 4 beers, and 8 bag of chips and 3 cocktails. Put it on my name. And I do that sometimes at the gym. The problem is that's not free. You have to pay for it. It gets on your bill. And sometimes, I'll just go up. Hey, can I get a smoothie? They make smoothies. And the smoothie, let's face it, it's way cheaper to make your own smoothies. Sometimes I'm just lazy and I don't want to clean up. So I'll just order the smoothie there, or, kind of protein shake smoothie. They have a really good one. Mocha Java, put a little peanut butter, it's bomb. It's like $12, which is, again, a stupid buy, but sometimes I'm really hungry after, a nice little power lift. And they add a tip option and they're staring right at you. And I feel really bad, but it's like, isn't this kind of, you're just making my smoothie, which half of it's already kind of pre-made. At least there is, like, they're doing something. The self-checkout line tip, that's fucking insanity. That's crazy. And like you say, some people aren't even paying attention, maybe have a couple beers in them already. That's crazy. As a Rams fan, I believe they make a Super Bowl run next season if they go heavy defense in the offseason. Do you think using the old model of going all in and F those picks is the best route to take? Maybe going out and bringing in a guy. This guy's already off the board. This is kind of an old question. Like Chris Jones or another D tackle with it. And I almost said Antonio Davis. Aaron Donald. He just wrote AD. Or do you believe they should go more conventional route? I think you got to be very careful with that. And they just found themselves in a position, right, where that caught up to them. I think having picks allows you some flexibility, and what they did worked. But now they went the other route last year, and a lot of those high picks, or I guess they weren't high picks, but, second, third, they even have a second rounder. They definitely had third, fourth. I mean, those guys were a huge reason they were in the playoffs and easily could have won that playoff game against the Lions. So I think there's a balance. And once you have success with draft picks, cheap labor, it's kind of easier to go that route. Now, as of recording this, you always wonder, like, could they be a sleeper to make a huge trade for a player with their first round pick? I think that's always on the table. I think that's always something they heavily, heavily consider, as they should. But I would, for the first time, maybe try to use some of my draft ammo because proven, like, you guys are pretty good drafters. Love the pod. Thoughts on the NFL separating quarterback contracts from the rest of the cap or splitting the salary cap so offensive and defensive sides of the ball are their own cap? We talk about this a lot, making a quarterback contract a percentage of the salary cap, making somehow to maybe your highest paid player, even if he's not a quarterback, if you've drafted him, like a TJ Watt, Nick Bosa, right? A player, Elaine Johnson, there's some benefit. Like, it does make sense, but it doesn't feel like that's ever going to happen. We talk a lot about that, and I get questions about that a lot. It's just something you might have a conversation at a bar with a buddy, but it doesn't even feel like that's ever gained any traction to being reality. So it's fun to talk about, but it doesn't, I do not expect that, because ultimately what that would mean would be the owner spending more money. So the one benefit for them having the hard cap, it does limit how much they can spend. And if you did something like that, the quarterback contract doesn't count on a second contract. Well, it's not like the players union is going to allow the salary cap to come down. So I think the owners like the gig they got right now. And that would have to be something collectively bargained, which I would imagine they are just not going to do. Just got my 3 and out hoodie, and it's awesome. Worn it like 3 days straight. Good man, Steve. Question for the bag. I'm 17 years old, and I'm graduating. Congrats on a piece of paper. Serve you well. I'm not going to go to college currently and trying to be an equipment assistant for an NFL team. Do you have any suggestions of how I can break into the world of working in football like that with no serious, relevant prior experience? Are there any entry-level positions in the NFL where you can work with something football related? I think that's going to be very difficult. I really do. To just get your foot in the door as an 18-year-old with no experience and you don't know anybody. The only reason I got in the NFL was knowing people in the NFL. And the only reason I knew people in the NFL is I started in college football. So I don't know your academic situation, But I would recommend, and I say this to anyone trying to get their foot in the door related to football, which would mean training, like a trainer, equipment guy, obviously scout, coach. The easiest way to do that is through college. And whether you have to go to junior college to then go to a regular college, it is really, really hard if you don't know anybody. It's borderline impossible. When I was in college at Cal Poly, when I didn't know anybody, I sent like, I don't know, probably 15, 20 letters to teams. You just look on the internet, you find, you wrote, not like the head coach or the GM, just kind of aimlessly sent. It's like you don't even know what you don't even know. And I would say 90% of them did not write me back. I still have some of the letters from like the Bears, the Giants, the Packers. I mean, they all said no. And these were like the business people. So it's very, very hard, man. If you were going to try to go your route, one thing you could do is try to find equipment staff, the head of equipment for all these teams, go to the team websites, and then maybe find them on LinkedIn and connect with them and DM them that way. But even that is going to be hard. Diehard Washington fan. Colin's take that the Commanders should take Daniels at 2, but like you, I think that the prototypical build of Maye seems hard to pass up on for a team in dire need. Allen, Herbert, or Big Ben. What are your thoughts? I would just watch the highlight tape of Malik Neighbors, and you watch Jaden Daniels make these throws. Like he's a legitimate prospect. He's a big-time athlete. He's got a big-time arm. He's accurate, and he's tall. Now, the knock is he's skinny, but if you feel like he can put on weight, like why can't he become a high-end quarterback? He's not just some tiny little dude, right, who's a good athlete. He's tall. He's just slight. And you can see it on TV or on YouTube when you're watching highlights of him. You could see it at the Heisman when he was in his clothes. But if you believe he can add weight through a strength conditioning program, it's harder for younger guys to put on weight, just the right eating, get with the nutritionist. I think he's very, very difficult to pass up. Maye is a huge projection, at least the guy that I watched. Maybe I need to go back and watch more, but the guy I watched was just, I don't know. Smash Mouth, the band, sent me a DM. Perfection on Purdy with Coward. I've watched every play since he came in. I don't know what he's talking about. Maybe sometimes I push back on Colin when he says Purdy sucks. 2024, this guy just sent me NFL media. 2024 Scouting Combine reaches over 5 million viewers. And his comment was just, the NFL is king. Even if you're a junkie, and I mean a junkie's junkie, the Combine, I actually enjoy it more for the coaching interviews. Like if you're just watching the workouts, they'll bring in a head coach or a GM to the booth. A college coach, I watched Sharon Moore in there with DJ and Rich. He was really impressive, like really impressive. I like that element, but just the workouts, like the 40s, it's cool to watch a guy run a good 40, but just watching guys run 40s over and over can be, to me, a little boring. I think it's much more of an entertainment product, and why I think it resonates is because you'll just be like, John Harbaugh will be in the booth. Jim Harbaugh will be in the booth. Belichick used to go in the booth. Like that part's cool. Hi, John. Question for the bag. Niners are going to be in the market for a backup quarterback. Am I crazy to say they should bring back Jimmy Garoppolo? Knows the system, locker room, and has been to a Super Bowl. I know his relationship with Kyle got weird, but curious your thoughts. I think there comes a point in time where you just move on. And if you get him for nothing, I think it would be enticing to them because they don't have a backup quarterback. Sam Darnold, they felt very comfortable with Sam Darnold. Now he's gone. Brandon Allen, who they like a lot, it's much different being the third string quarterback and the backup quarterback. You're one broken ankle from just being the starting quarterback. Shit, it happened to Purdy. So Jimmy Garoppolo is also suspended, right? He's going to miss the first couple games for performance-enhancing drugs. which I think it's fair to say a lot of times when guys get popped, it's not always just because they want to lift more. A lot of time injury related. You're trying to rehab injuries. So maybe he didn't feel comfortable with all these surgeries he's had, and he's had a lot of them. He gets hurt a lot. I hear you. Knows the system. Players like him. I have a hard time seeing Kyle go back down that road, but I think you can never say never. I'm a Dolphins fan. I do not like Tua. I think he means as a player, not personally. I do not get why they're extending him. They haven't yet. It's pretty obvious that they are nowhere near the Chiefs, Bills, or Ravens because of the quarterback. We both know Tua won't ever win a Super Bowl, so why would they resign the quarterback? Well, this gets to why the Atlanta Falcons signed Kirk Cousins. Right? This notion of I saw Cam Newton shitting on him. One playoff win? Yeah, it's not about the one playoff win. It's about winning 10 or 11 games. That's all they want to do. They just want to be in the playoffs. They are not trying to win the Super Bowl. They're trying to be in the playoffs. And when Tua's been their quarterback, they've been to the playoffs back-to-back years. Yeah, they got bounced in the first round, and they did not win the division. And they're probably worse now than they were last year based on some of the, impact players leaving. I mean, you lose your second best player. That's going to be hard to fill that void at defensive line. But I just don't know if they have any other options. Now, I tend to be not in the mode of just do it to do it. I understand why the Falcons did it. I don't even think that's that crazy. To me, Tua, it's well, how much is he getting? Can I give him Baker Mayfield's contract? Because if I could, I would do that. But all these reports are $190, $200 million guaranteed, $45, $50 million a year. I'm sorry, I'm out. I'd play it out another year. That's just not usually what teams do, though. So I, under no circumstances, could sign him to that contract. But I understand why teams do. But then they end up complaining about it in a couple years, which is what I think would happen. Now, here's the thing. When you sign Tua to this contract, it actually makes the next couple years his cap number cheaper. But it comes into play in a couple years when his cap hit just goes up dramatically because you push the money back. I would play it out another year. Doubt they do it, though. You mentioned the 18-game schedule as being a benefit to everybody, especially the players. Financially, not physically. When will that benefit reach the fans? I think about cost per game, and most games are completely unreasonable to attend. Game time, promo code John, $20 off. How can the NFL make the live spectating experience more accessible to people of all socioeconomic statuses? Well, this is where I think you have misread their business. Their business model is not based on you, whether you can afford a ticket or not. They simply do not care. Their business model is getting you to watch those games on television. Obviously, they make money from people attending their games. But whether you can afford, and listen, these tickets, I've said it forever with the NBA, the NBA media not complaining for years about these guys sitting out was such a shot at the paying customer. It was embarrassing because going to watch a good NBA team with star players is not cheap. NFL tickets, obviously not cheap either. If you want a decent seat, 50-yard line, second level, club seats, it's outrageous. I went to a game. I bought some tickets for some buddies a couple years ago, Rams, Niners. I spent an astronomical amount on the tickets. Now, granted, business can write it off. Still, it was a lot of cash. Still money I had to spend. And I get back to this, and I'll tell you, just like I would tell anyone, whether they have $1 in their pocket or $100 million in their pocket, they don't care if you go to the games or not. They simply do not. They care if you watch the games on television. That's where they make the overwhelming majority of their money. That is their business model. So I hear what you're saying, but the ticket prices are not going to come down, one. And whether, lower middle class, lower income people can afford it, they just simply don't care. Because if you can't attend the games, here's what they know if you're an NFL fan. You're going to watch them on TV. So when you see all these reports about television ratings, that's what matters to them. Why? Because that's where they make their money. So it sucks. and I've been lucky to go to games for a long time, many for free. And I never took that for granted. Now, granted, I never went to an NFL game till I worked in the NFL in 2010. Never attended a game growing up. Never attended a game in college. I just never went, which is crazy to think about, but I never did. I didn't even go to that many games growing up, just in general. I went to a couple Giants games and Kings games here and there, but wasn't like it was expensive. It was just not something my family really did. But at the time, I didn't view it from my perspective. And I understand you don't view it from that perspective either, but that's just the simple reality of their business model is they want you to watch. They just simply, like in baseball, they want you to attend. Why? They have 81 home games. And these teams make a lot of money from the gate. The NFL and even NFL teams sit there on your couch and watch the game, which sucks if you want to go. Yeah, I respect anyone who sits really high in the stands, but if you're paying a couple $100 to sit high and you can't see much, that does suck. So, I my pushback would be, I don't think there's a better seat in the house in the sport of football than your couch. There really isn't. It's a sport literally made for television. It's hard to beat. Doesn't fix your problem, but that's where the NFL kind of measures out on that issue.